Welcome to season 3 of the Embodiment Podcast. And this season, we're covering Jason's model for everything. Finally, right? This is the 5th episode. So in the previous episodes, we've covered the layers that were 8, 7, 6, and 9. So we've covered everything from 6 to 9. Remember, the model is from 1 to 10. Now we're at the heart of the model, 5, right in the middle. And this is kind of Jason's wheelhouse because this is where Buddhism, lies. This is like the heart of it. So Jason, can't wait to hear it. What is the 5?
So the 5 is what modern scientists, cognitive scientists, have been very interested in, called metacognition. It's gotten a lot of press. And it's the awareness of itself, awareness of awareness before it becomes split into thoughts and feelings.
In the 6. Nice.
Exactly. 6 and 7. So you can think of it as the self. In Buddhism, we call it the self-reflective awareness. The conscious mind is another way to say it. Again, these are just words, so I'll explain a little bit. So the experience when you're driving, music's playing, thoughts are drifting, and then you get several miles and you don't even know where you were. And then so that's an example of the 5 not being there. But then noticing it wasn't there is the 5 coming back.
Right.
That's a quick little metaphor. So at first, you think about how perception works. We think of it as like something appears like an outside object, and then a moment later, we process that experience or an inner experience. We have a thought, and then we start thinking and feeling about that thought, what this person did to us. It seems as though, from our experience, that there is like an outside stimuli, and then there is a moment later a mind that reflects on it. This is so inherent to how most people think. But the great Buddhist masters, when they really started digging deep into the mind, Mipam Rinpoche explains it as self-reflective awareness, Rig in Tibetan. It's like a lamp. When a lamp shines out, it illuminates the object, but it also illuminates itself at the same time. So, in other words, it's happening simultaneously. So, this brings to our attention that the mind is aware of itself in the moment simultaneously. Now, that couldn't be possible if the 8 was really real. But it could be possible because, again, remember this concept of a dream. In a dream, you are simultaneously the object, the perception of the object, and the awareness that you're having that experience. So you're all 3 parts at the same time. They seem like 3 parts. It's really only 1 part. It's 5. But that's, I know this is like a little mysterious, but so the Buddha defined the mind as knowing and empty. They like these pithy 2 words, knowing and empty, right? And what that means is the mind, the 5, has no form. It's empty, but it's a continuous process, and it's aware. So it has no form. It's not physical. It doesn't come from the 8, which again is so deeply ingrained. So the more exoteric, or Buddha taught many levels. So there is a level that deals with the 8, and that's called the Abhidharma, the traditional Abhidharma. This is like, and in that world, there is an object. You need an object. You need a sense faculty, like the eye, a functioning eye. And then there's a consciousness that's aware of that experience. So it's always talked about as those 3. And again, assuming the 8, it means the object is there a priori, meaning the object was already out there. You happen to see it, and now you're aware of that. So you need all 3 parts. And that's how the 8 works. And for all for all intents and purposes, when you're dealing with other people who are in the 8, you kind of have to talk in those terms. But if you open your mind to a different perspective, and that's what this model invites you to, is thoughts don't arise at the sensory level. They actually come from the 3. Which we'll talk about in the future, but the 3 is like the source. They take on an archetypal form in the 4, and then they emerge in the 5 preformed. Again, kind of like a dream. In a dream, there's such rich meaning from the unconscious. It's not like in a dream, like you're on a plane. You didn't have to build the plane. You don't have to put real gas in the plane. It just arrives as a scene, like a video game. When you're playing a video game, like everything's even though it's rendering in the moment, like all of the life force of the enemies and everything is already in one moment, one packet. So by the time it gets to 5, it arises, and it doesn't create the thoughts, but it witnesses and discerns them. That's the key thing. A lot of people talk about witnessing consciousness, but there's a slight discernment in the looking, and that's again Buddha's really unique contribution, is showing that the way you see things, again, like quantum physics kind of came to this looking in the 8, but the Buddha realized that there is a slight discernment in the 5, and how you handle that sets up the whole motion of what's going to arise after that. So the witness, it's a witness. It's called prajna. So this is considered like the most important thing to mind. And again, the great secret is that the witness, mindfulness, and prajna are simultaneous. Because if you're thinking in terms of the 8 or even the 6, it's like something happens and now we're going to analyze it after. Like we have to bring it to mind to analyze. But this is saying that on the very subtle level, when things arrive in the 5, you're making a slight judgment on it. And that, so you get it. And this is called in Sanskrit smriti. Smriti, it means mindfulness, but it also means memory. So again, this is if you practice the 5, you will have incredible memory, because the 5 is always present. That's the thing. It's kind of like the 7, the 5 and the 7. They're always running. You have a 5, I have a 5. Everyone has the same 5. It's ours. It's actually like who we are, but we all, it functions exactly the same. Empty and knowing, and continuous arising. So, and this arising obviously is much faster than the 8 arising. So, they go faster as you go. But so smriti means non-forgetfulness, and it holds the object, and it's the way you cultivate the 5. But once you cultivate it, then smriti is like working automatically. It belongs to layer 5, but it supports the 6. It works with the 6. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that the 5 and the 6, we're talking about them separately, but they always work together. You really can't separate them. They're two sides of the same coin. Layer 5 knows what is happening. 6 interprets what it means. So it's important, though, to distinguish them, to master them, but you can never truly separate them. So, for example, when anger is happening and a story about being right is running, that's the 6. The moment you notice anger is present and a story is forming, that is noticing in the 5. The witness, wisdom, wonder. So we talked about in episode, when we talked about the 9, I said it's
I thought that was going to happen.
Hey, John.
Hey, so we're I'm looking at the time. This will be about 2 minutes. I can cut out. The last thing I heard clearly before you started
Yeah.
freezing up was 5 and 6. So let me ask you a question
Okay.
about the 5 and 6, and we'll just go back
I
over that.
think
And
I
then,
solved the problem. I have to close everything. I think
okay,
it's just too much data that it just knocks my whole internet out. So I close everything from now on.
okay. So you see where the 5 and 6 are?
So the five knows what's happening, or do we, or the very beginning?
Yeah. That part. You ready? I'm going to ask you questions
Okay.
that'll lead into that, and you
Yeah,
pick
we'll
up from
fix it.
there. Okay?
We can fix it up good. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So
I think
yeah.
we
Okay.
just let me get my screen right. There we go. Okay. Whenever you're
Okay.
ready.
Okay, so then how does the 5 interact with the 6?
Okay. So yeah, that's a great question. The five and the six are always connected. They're like two sides of the same coin. You really can't separate them, but phenomenologically or experientially, you can separate them. They're like two functions, but they're not something you can never pull them apart. So right, so like for example, layer 5 knows what is happening. I'm sorry, layer 5 knows what's happening. Layer 6 interprets what's happening.
Okay.
So yeah, they're always in the experience. So for example, when anger is happening and there's a story about being right is running, that's the 6. And the moment you notice anger is present and a story is forming, that's the 5. That noticing is the 5. So they're always together. And but yeah, how we view the arising in the 5 directly shapes what the layer 6 will program. But here's the thing, I got to add this here. And this is why I got so much from you and Flowcess, is I think you explain the 6, because again, like you said, Buddhism is really emphasizing the 5. It's emphasizing all of it. When you get to the
Mhm.
higher teachings, it goes all from 1 to 10. It does the whole thing. But one of the things that I really liked about what you show is like, yeah, you could work on the 5 all day. But if there was a way to find your uniqueness in a quick way, it's a major shortcut. So if you have the Flowcess plus the 5, so they work.
To fix the 6. I,
Yeah,
I like what you're saying here. The
yeah,
5 and the 6 work together. They're a system. They have different functions, but they're so quick. And everything you taught in season 1 and season 2 was you got so good at the 5, it
mhm.
slowed down the frames going into the 6.
We're going to talk about
So
that. Yeah,
yeah. So what I like about what the reason why I say like the 5 is like where Buddhism kind of lives and dominates is the West doesn't recognize a 5.
exactly.
The West is recognizing a brain or a 6, but it doesn't recognize something intangible operating it. And whereas
Yeah.
Buddhism sees that, and when you mastered that, it slowed down your ability to deal with the 6, and you could see it in the moment. And so I don't know how people can fix a 6 if they don't know the
Well,
5.
you've been doing it though. That's what I'm trying to say. Like you've been doing it, but now we could do it so much more powerful together.
Right.
That's the whole message. And if you see in the model, you'll notice that the centers, like the 3, the 5, and the 7 are centers. So those are things that we have to recognize. But whereas the 4, 6, and 8, that's where we have to kind of master. We use the 3, 5, and 7 to master those, but they're always together again. And ultimately, they're all one. That's the one
Yeah.
little preview. But so yeah, so this is again Buddha's genius. He talks about these 8 steps. And it reminds me, I've heard this thing on the internet. I forget who said it. It's like watch your thoughts because they become your words. Watch your words because they become your actions. Watch your actions and they become your life, maybe, or something. That's Buddha said that again 2,600 years ago, and he says view leads to intention. Intention leads to speech. Speech leads to action. Action leads to livelihood. Livelihood leads to effort. effort leads to mindfulness. Mindfulness leads to concentration. Again, this is a huge topic, but just real quickly, the view is the 5, right? And then the intention is where the 5 and the 6 kind of meet, right? I'll discuss that below. And then speech is the 6. Like, and speech including one, even before you say the words, forming the words to communicate. It's really communication. And then action, livelihood, effort is in the 7 and 8, and then mindfulness and concentration are back to the 5. So it's a loop. And like you said, it's very hard to change the 6, the 7, the 8 without the 5. And again, I used to believe that, like, if you don't have Buddha, if you don't have these trainings, you can't get it. But again, I've been proven wrong, because again, like, you're getting people into flow. You can work on the 8, the 7, the 6. You don't have to work on the 5, but working on the 5 really does help everything else. It is kind of the director. So yeah, so we could spend a whole nother topic on that, but like, yeah, like you could imagine, like, your view, how you interpret like what's coming in from the 3, the story you tell it is going to change your intention. So if you believe, like, so view is like, it really starts with like, it's again, this is so unable to be explained. You have to experience, and we'll get into that. But that view becomes a slight discernment. That discernment leads to the energy in the 6 to go after that. So let's say you believe, sacrificing virgins leads to, if that's the belief, then you're going to start to look for virgins, right? And then it's going to become, people talk about, oh, that's a good virgin, maybe we could sacrifice her. Then people will start doing it. Then it becomes livelihood. Now it's a cultural thing. Now it becomes effort. Now people's jobs revolve around this culture of sacrificing the virgins. And that leads to mindfulness. So now this is where you're putting your attention, is this belief. And that leads to concentration, which is like mindfulness extended. It becomes just the 95% unconscious that you're living in, which then goes back to your view. So that's why I've always made a big thing, and this is why debate, and it's like, it's like important to like know what to eat, like, but if someone just tells you, it's not the same as understanding why.
Right.
And that comes from like working with the 5. Okay, yeah, there's a lot, but there's a lot to go through. So, so this is cool too, is that the 5 is pre-verbal, so it's before the 6. It's before it becomes a thought. It has feeling and vision, and like these fully formed packets. People call them downloads now, and everybody claims to have downloads, but it's just a big packet, a cache. They called it in Tibet. People would get these. You train yourself to get these, and then you would just download like an encyclopedia, and then they would spend the next 7 years writing down what they downloaded. It's pre-narrative, pre-ego. So it's not a plan. It's not a story. It's more like, this is what reality is leaning towards. So whereas fire, so on the 5, intention, that's why I said it's like the bridge between the 5 and the 6. Intention and view are inseparable at the deepest level. But when it becomes 6, it becomes pronounced intention. This is ignition. This is more when people think of motivation as intention. The 5 is mental intention. Now it becomes more into the realm of story and going to take action. So yeah, emotional charge, inner speech. You start to like, that packet becomes like, I'm going to do this. So it's like, but if you really start to look at your where your thoughts are coming from, you realize they don't come the way most people miss the 5, and they're just hearing the story. So yeah. So it's in the 6, it becomes I want, I will, I should, this means. Okay, so yeah, and then speech is 6. So intention is rooted in layer 5 as orientation of knowing, but it ignites in 6 as motivation, narrative, and speech. When intention is unconscious, fire leads. When intention is clear, air leads. And again, I said that like 95% of people, their human behavior is automatic. And what even science, will tell you that metacognition is how you break the patterns. It's, and that's the key. Buddha literally means awakened consciousness. Buddha, like that's why you said Buddha is all about the 5.
Mhm.
But our whole culture is designed to keep us unconscious. We go to school at a certain time. We have a 9 to 5 job. And then we have, now more than ever, that's why I'm saying this model and what we're doing it's like things are so bad, things are so unconscious that there will be somewhat of a renaissance for this kind of thing, because it's going to be so obvious, the autopilot, it's like, and it's because it's mostly on the phones now. It's kind of, so the meta awareness, Buddha taught how to interrupt the autopilot, insert conscious moments, train awareness to know itself, and change the way we view by deep reprogramming. It's like breaking a spell. And if you could think about it like a river flows the same way, could be decades, 100 years, and the water flows through it over and over again. It follows that pattern. That's like the 95%, the programming. But a storm, a tree, or human intervention can change the course of the river. And that's a metaphor for your brain. Your brain has electricity running through it. Most people, the electricity wants to go through the same pathways over and over again. And that's why we said there was like a study that showed most people are just above coma. It's literally physiologically true. It's electrically true. But when you work with the 5, you're just changing your brain all different ways, and that keeps it young, and all the studies. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, like you get these downloads, these pre-packaged information, which you could think of them as archetypes. It's not yet a story, but it holds a ton of meaning. So Buddha is an archetype for the 5, but even in the Buddha realm, Buddha has an archetype for his compassion, an archetype for his power. He has an archetype for his wisdom, his 5, and that's Manjushri. Let me see a picture of him.
Okay.
He's got a sword. He's got a book on a lotus, and he's supposed to be like 18 years old, and he's on a lotus. Whenever you see the Buddhas on a lotus, that means that they're coming from the 3, not from the 8. But what he represents is, his name Manjushri means eternal youthful, right? Why? Because the 5 is always the same. That's why when you talk to people who are 80, they're like, I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I'm so old. I feel exactly the same as I did, because that's your 5. That's the real you. And what happens is people mistake the 6 and the 8 for the 5, and that's where all of the suffering comes in. When you realize you're a 5, you're eternal. And this is like, again, this isn't like some kind of religious kind of revelation. This is common sense when you just look at the mind. So yeah, layer 5, it always feels the same. And when you realize, we go through a lot of logic and debate to arrive at that this 5 cannot be caused by anything but a previous moment of itself. So therefore, it can't be dependent on the body. Again, this is where it's a big shift. And I don't care, Christian, Buddhist, most people are living their world as though they are not the 5, but they could talk about the 5, but they still, and again, if I was in a plane crash, that's when you really are put to the test, but you're in that situation. We all have our habits in the 6 and the 8 that pull us, but now's the time to practice, another thing is archetypal. So we talk about the 8, the 7, 6, and 5, earth, water, fire, and air. as having these enlightened activities. So that the air is destructive. So people don't like destruction. It sounds bad, but it's like cutting, burning, smashing confusion at the root. And then whereas the fire is attracting, magnetism. People love story, right? And then the 7 is pacifying and healing. And then the 8 is enriching or manifestation. So people fear destruction, but we're not talking. The 5 is not violence; it's precision. He has a sword in his hand, right? The sword, it's a flaming sword. It's when you're in the 5, you can cut. That's how you can really cut the stories, and you can change. You could have huge changes almost overnight. And this is documented, these spontaneous healings, and people just completely change. What's his name? Saul becomes Paul in the Bible. So Manjushri Sword does not cut beings, it cuts the false views, it cuts the frozen stories. It doesn't just cut it, it burns it up so it could never return. So when you're getting to the root, that's permanence, the opposite of emptiness, suffering, the opposite of bliss. These are stories. When you cut them, they never come back if you do it right. So the monks meditate, they visualize Manjushri before they're debating, studying, and teaching. But then Manjushri has a wrathful form called Yamantaka, meaning the destroyer of death. And he looks like a demon. He's got horns, but he destroys death. Because anything that can be destroyed, like you're trying to destroy everything but the 5 to see that your true self is the 5. So again, people can get squirmish and be like, oh, they're worshiping demons. It's not worship. It's literally just archetypes. It's just when you see that character and all the different details, it reminds you non-verbally. And supposedly these deities, these presentations came from the Buddha, getting them from the 3-4. He was getting so it's not all archetypes are created equally. If it comes from so we talked about we called it like the prophetic vision, the clarity. I want to add to that wonder, which is interesting. Wisdom, wonder, So we got freedom, ecstasy, flow, and wonder. And I call it the art of being wrong. So again, the 5, remember, has 2 qualities. It has this witness, this incredible focus. We're going to get to how focused it can get. But it also has this discernment. So it has 2 parts. So you can train it by meditation, but also by analysis. So, and the best type of analysis leads to realizing we're wrong about something, because that's how we grow. So being in the state of wonder like a child, before you have to prove something by being right. A child's not expected to know anything, so it could ask any question it wants. And again, that's how you really train the 5, and that's how you really work this whole model and work all of reality. The model is if you could stay in the state of wonder, you're able to change. If you, and it's that simple, But then the witness, the meditation, fine tunes that more and more. But they fine tune each other. It's so beautiful to dance. The more you're able to analyze away the stories, the more you'll be able to sink into a meditation quicker. The more you're able to sink into meditation quicker, the more you're able to, do the analysis better. This is a famous concept. We call it like the merging of calm abiding and discernment. And that's what the sword and the book represents. So, and also like the book, if you think about it, the book is the best technology they had at the time. So he's holding the book, right? But even though we can get information, and the specific book is called the Prajna Paramita Sutra. Prajna is the 5, it's that whole idea, that discernment part of the 5, I should say. So that's that's why like the Buddha's, the pinnacle of all the teachings comes down to this 5, like you said. And, but also a little bonus is that even though we have people ask me all the time, is there an audiobook for that? And it's great. But you cannot beat the book when it comes to developing the five. It's just the way it works your brain to actually have to get the visual, turn it into audio, whatever it is the most sophisticated technology for developing the five. That's why I tell people, if you hate reading, I get it. You don't want to read a 1,000-page book, but like the journey of 1,000 pages begins with a single page. Like start with 1 page a day and just read 1 page a day, and then you could finish a book, in a year. So again, when you have that wonder, now you're turning towards the 3-4 as opposed towards turning towards the 8. That's a big shift in what it is. That's really the goal. But before you even turn towards the 3-4, you have to practice staying away from the 6, not letting the 6 dominate, and be able to kind of realize the 5 is the monkey. The 6 is the elephant. So the monkey is the director. It knows what to do, but it has to work with the 6 in the right way. So yeah, we talked about, again, like when you cut away all the parts of you that are not you, you get to the true self. And that's like, I exist, I am aware. That's the deep sense. And, Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. But in I think Latin or French, it was like it means I'm cognizant, therefore I am. It's really the 5. When you say think, people could think it's the 6. People in our culture think of thinking as 6, but thinking is 5 and 6. But what Descartes meant was specifically the 5, and he was right. He was right about it. Of course, how it's interpreted, that's the problem with everything, with the Bible, with the Buddha, with philosophers. They interpret, like when you look at the quantum physicists from like the 20s, they all became Buddhists. They all got into this model, and then people took all of that, and that's why it hasn't advanced much in 100 years until now. We're ready for it now. Again, we can't. Science will never find the 5 in the 8 by studying the brain. They'll find things lighting up and stuff, but it's unfindable, and that's kind of. But it does have a lot of research that the state of the metacognition or the 5, the default mode network. So they come to the same conclusion. That's the 6, the default mode network. That's the part of us that keeps us locked into these stories. So now they're showing this is how, that's their way of saying it. These are, so now we get into the really fun stuff called the jhanas. So this is what Buddhist practice really looks like, at least in the cultivating the 5. So the jhanas are like shifting gears. It's like shifting gear in your car. When you shift a gear, it like runs different, and it has different, it's optimal to go between like this speed and this speed. So jhanas are states where the 6 starts to quiet down and the 5 becomes more present. And they're not trances, because the Buddha warned against trance states. This is not trancing. This is the opposite of trance. This is what I was trying to explain on the Nephilim Death Squad, but now I got it better. So and it's interesting. There's 4 jhanas that Buddha talked about. So the first one is they become progressively more peaceful, and your breathing, just like the gears in the car, your breath becomes slower, more and more subtle. So when you get to the 4th jhana, they say breathing stops altogether. You don't even need to breathe. It's like a very deep state. And breath, that's another thing about the 5. Breath and like the speed of the thoughts and the thinking are always connected, like 2 gears. So we're going to talk about it later, but one of the ways to always work on the 5, this is like across the board, documented. Like this guy Andrew Weil, he's a naturopath. He's like the first naturopathic doctor. When they asked him, what's the one health tip you give to everybody? And he said it's the breathing, where you inhale and then you hold it for a little bit and exhale for 2 seconds longer than the inhale. That brings you into the 5. That's like a little cheat to get into the 5. But if you once you master getting into the 5, you don't have to even consciously do the breath. You go into the 5 and the breath automatically shifts gears. So it's kind of like you climb up the ladder and then you could knock it away once you get there. So yeah, the first jhana, you could think of it as stabilizing the 8. So there's still thoughts, but you're not thinking about the 8. You're just dealing with these thoughts that arise, and there is this bliss throughout the body. The 7, in other words, the 7 becomes more prominent, and there is a contentment or a joy, which is the stabilization of the 6. So this is kind of, you could think of, and then the 4th jhana is the real stabilization of the 5. So in the 2nd jhana, you have this very somatic feeling, and there's no narration anymore. And then, so yeah, when you're in the 4 now, so you could think of it as like, we're talking about frames, and you talk about, one thought per second, right? Or one thought at a time. So this goes one level, this takes that even to the next level. Imagine if that one thought can slow down so much. So by the time you get to the 4th jhana, you could have one thought and just freeze that thought and stay with that thought without it moving. It's so
So the second one doesn't have narration to it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first one is really focus in a sense.
So I would say like you coming up with flow sets, you creating a model, you need the 1st jhana.
Right.
So even though you might not have formally sat down and done it, the 1st jhana is a place to make models, we could say.
Right. Then the second one is the narration is gone.
Yeah.
So we're getting real slow here. Okay. So what's the third one?
The third one, even the sense in the 2nd one, there's like this like ecstasy. There's like a big ecstasy in the body. When you get to the 3rd one, the ecstasy quiets down. Now okay. You could say the 6, remember, is like flow. So this you could think of as, just this, like the essence of flow state is happening.
Okay.
and then when it gets to the 5, it's that complete. And each one of these layers, you also feel more yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You feel more connected to yourself. Now, again, remember, like in order to get the 9, you need all of them. So I'm not saying that the goal is to get to the 5, but this is just a way to master the 5 so you can get better at achieving the 9. So throughout all 4, layer 5 becomes clear and self-knowing, and 6 becomes increasingly quiet. So the jhanas demonstrate that mind can know itself without stories. And Tilopa, this great master, described it like 3 stages. When you first try to do this, your thoughts are arising like a waterfall. Mm-hmm. It's unstable, but you're starting to recognize it, but you didn't. And again, this is happening whether you sit down to recognize it or not. Then it becomes like a river. You see this flow, this continuation of thoughts. It's more they're continuous and integrated. And again, and then when you get to the ocean, the 3rd one, it becomes like an ocean. It's just like completely still. So, and that's when you really master the 5. So we mentioned that the 7, 8 is like the Matrix. The 5, 6 is like the holodeck in Star Trek. You familiar with the Star Trek at all?
Is that holodeck? Is that where? I don't know what that is. I thought that was where they beamed away, but that's.
Oh, that's what's that? Yeah, that's the transporter.
That's something else. Yeah, transporter. Yeah.
What's the holodeck? The holodeck is basically a matrix that they get to create. So they can set it it's a place where you can experience any scenario. So they have all it's AI in the future. So they can recreate a Western scene.
It's a training program in the Matrix.
It's a training program. Exactly. It's a training program.
Okay.
So that's, That's yeah. So they in the holodeck, it's just a little more elaborate place for that. But yeah, that's it. The 5-6 is a place to work things out. Which again, it's not just like, obviously people would think like, yeah, you sit down and work out your thoughts before you do them. That's productive, but it's more than that, because you're actually the stories, because of the observer effect, which we talked about, is actually creating the 7-8. You're part of the 7-8. So working in the holodeck, testing out the scenarios, is actually like the matrix is the realizations that we're all having holodecks. But one of the great realizations I had recently is that we're all meeting there, but the trick is not to try to change people's 5-6. You're not trying to change people's minds. You show up the best you can, but and it's just remembering that they, like, not to confuse, they have a 5 and 6 also. Is to remember everyone's got a 5 and a 6. Because when you see someone in the 7 and the 8, you see their overt behavior. You see, you're seeing the effects instead of looking at the causes. So you're getting mad at the effects instead of helping them. And again, this is what you teach so much, so well. So this is a fun metaphor because, it's like a mirror, the physical and the mental. These are two things which eventually are going to converge in the 3. But so we talked about how, well, I'll start with the air. The air is 100 quintillion times per second in the physical outer. This is metaphorical. So, for example, the 4 is the Planck constant. It's the shortest time could ever be after it splits from time space. But this air is like this reverberation, this hum that's in the field of the 4.
So the 5 is the air, you're saying?
The 5 is the air, yeah.
Okay.
5 is air, and this is like, and this is metaphorical, like that metacognition. It's like this background hum before any stories start to take place. Whereas 6, the fire was the quadrillion, 100 quadrillion times per second, 10 to the 15. And this is how energy starts to happen, photon electron energy exchange.
Okay.
The 6, we talked about the field and its hydrogen bonds breaking and coming apart. And that's metaphor for how we're all connected through the 7, through this field where, our emotions, there's like these waves like that. We're all nodal points in this thing. And then the earth is still very fast, million times per second, but it's the structural, they call it like the lattice. It's how crystals form. So you could think of it as a crystal. A crystal is like, is well, I won't even get it. It's like energy that's slowing down into atoms that are similar, that because of the shape of them, I mean, it's so miraculous, like, but it's a perfect metaphor. How a crystal's formed physically is a perfect metaphor for how, the 3 becomes the 8 even, we'll get more into that. That's actually what we'll talk about. So, the fire represents energy and activation, like the photons jumping between electrons. Air sits one level deeper. It corresponds to the ultrafine resolution that makes those jumps intelligible in the first place. In physics, this is sometimes described as a carrier rhythm associated with the electron itself, far faster than observable interactions. Metaphorically, air is the clarity that sees patterns instantly, before emotion, before story, before reaction. It doesn't narrate experience, it discerns it. Again, we think experience is coming from the 8. It's really coming the opposite. Meaning, experience, life is coming from the 3. Which again, if everyone kind of agree, every Christian, Jew kind of understands that. But this is So like I was saying earlier, compassion. When you're in the 8, it's good to start off with like, I'm going to help this person who needs my help. But when you really start to when you get to this higher level of understanding, a bodhisattva, practicing bodhicitta, you realize that the goal, like you could solve a person's problem, but you might be making their life worse. You really want to help someone, you got to help them on the 5-6 level. And this is where we call it skillful means, upaya in Sanskrit. It means like, sometimes a great master will pretend to be a drunkard if that's going to help people wake up to their 5-6. You see these kung fu movies like Mr. Miyagi, like wax on, wax off, like all of that is called skillful means. It's when you become a master, and that's ingrained in Asian culture because it used to be all Buddhist. All from Japan to India was Buddhist. So that's still this idea of like this master who they used to whack you on the head, the Zen monks, and like sometimes like one guy, like he was studying for like 20 years with this master, and then finally he just grabbed him by the ear and pulled him, and that's how he awakened. So this is like the teacher knows like when you're ready, and so that's the 5, and that's the skillful means. So
Okay.
we talked about, dopamine is connected to fire, air is connected to acetylcholine. This is the neurotransmitter.
Okay, acetylcholine, what does that do?
That's the neurotransmitter of attention and focus and memory.
Oh.
When people starting to lose memory, they have declining acetylcholine.
Okay.
And it's connected directly. It fits perfectly. Metacognition.
Yeah.
So you got dopamine, acetylcholine, and then you have oxytocin from the 7, and then the serotonin of the 8. We talked about smriti, mindfulness, so important. When most people, I don't know what. Remember we were talking about how people think meditation is like emptying your mind, and I'm like, no, the actual definition is to focus on something. This is where we're talking about mindfulness. This is the real meaning, because they didn't use meditation. That's all Western. Even the word enlightenment, like, is not. People think of enlightenment as like, I know something, or I'm woke. It's not what Buddha means. Layer 5 is consciousness knowing itself, the pivot point of freedom, the seat of view, the doorway to wisdom. So the 5 is that which knows, immediate, clear, self-reflective, content light. Again, it's like, it's still you, it's still personal, it still has some slight charge to it. And that's where that's like that subtle discernment. But in 6 is what it means: interpretive, narrative, motivational, directional.
So it looks like the first 5 are not tangible in your model.
Exactly.
The first 5 are not tangible. The ultimate non-tangible thing is us, mind, uniqueness.
Yes.
And then the last 5 are all tangible, which again, there's a nice symmetry there with that.
Exactly. And again, even the word tangible, we have to be careful with, because it's really all the more what you realize is everything, even like it's kind of like everything is happening in the 3.
Right.
Even in the 8, it never actually leaves there, but the moving out into the model allows us to have experience, but it actually never left the 3, which we'll get to, which is
right. So it's like a projection or illusion, a lot of the analogies from the Matrix. So that 6 on is all projection, an illusion. And that's why getting rid of all that only leaves the 5. So emptying the 6, 7, 8
exactly
gets you back to the 5, because the 5 exists.
And the Buddha warned, first of all, he warned about only going to the jhanas. The jhanas, the Buddha warned so much about them. They're incredibly important, but they're addictive. And a lot of people, I had a phase of it. You can get very addicted to like, I don't care about the 8 anymore. I just want to be here all the time. And that's like meditation sickness. It's been warned about forever. But then some Buddhists, we call them like the lower school, are really just emphasizing the 5. But then the Mahayana, with the idea of bodhicitta, says you can't just do the 5. You got to do the 5 through 8. But then the deeper layer teachings, the Vajrayana, says they bring in the idea of the 9 and the 3. They say the 5 is not the end. Actually, the 5, but that's where we'll talk about that. That's where it gets very subtle. But it's accessible. So I'll just finish with like some ways to cultivate the 5. Because
Okay.
again, all of this, we're doing these great long talks, but at the end of the day, these are simple things to cultivate, all 4 of them. And what I do with the Wheel of Bliss is figure out which elements, if someone experiencing ecstasy, is someone comfortable experiencing freedom, where are they suffering, where are they struggling, and I already know that everybody has all 4 of those states in the optimal place, because it's not coming from the 8, it's coming from the 3. So everybody already has their body, not sorry, their entire being wants to be in those states. We're striving them, but again, when you look at the 8 and you watch the news, and it's like, well, at least I'm not getting shot today. At least I'm not, homeless. It's like you just see all the problems, so you feel better about like, okay, but really you're meant to be in these optimal states. But again, you can't blame. I'm not here to blame anyone. That's the ultimate conclusion. Everyone. It's a tricky thing, because when your view, your 5 is a certain way, you're creating these stories which are creating your life, and then it's recycling back, reconfirming your view. So if you don't do anything to stop it, but God, the 3 always sends things to break it. That's actually the blessing. That's why when they say, why does God do bad things? That's why, because it needs to wake people up from it. So
Well, I like how you definitely nailed the feedback loop there, where it's like we're making choices out of the 5 into the 6, which creates this story, which can hinder our flow in the 7, and then causes all the stuff to happen in the 8, and then we see that from the 5, and now want something different, and we're just stuck in the cycle, and the people aren't even aware that they're making decisions in the 5.
Exactly.
That's the thing, is they think they're living in the 8. You're actually living in the 5, or like you said before that, but it's like, at least get people back to the 5.
Yeah, the 5 is like
all the issues is not being in the 5.
Yeah, you're in the 5, but when you think that you are your story, now you're mistaking yourself for your 6. And when you think you're your body and your title and your possessions, now you're mixing it in the 8. So that's what Buddhism is addressing for the self. But I want something you said. Well, yeah, it'll come back to me. But yeah, so the core practices, I said it already, reading, but also audio, podcasting. But if you're going to do it, try to really concentrate, try to sit down. Contemplation, like ask yourself a difficult question that you don't know the answer for. Like Jim says, ask to be shown, close your eyes and see what comes to mind without having to write the story. Debate and dialogue. There's a reason why Buddhists love debate, because it really helps you get to the 5 on so many ways. Being wrong, it helps you get more to the truth, but also you have to cultivate the 5 to be good at debate. And you get to see other perspectives. So that's why the 6 is so important. That's really what it is. The 6 allows you to see all these different possibilities, but the 5 is the one that's going to know that's correct. But you can't just know that. You can't really master the 5 without the 6. That's why it's like it's such a perfect video game. It really is. Like there's no mistake in this game. Mentorship, so important, so lost from our culture.
So far, all the things you've listed, if you do them really well, like you said, you're not just playing an audiobook in the background, but like listening to the audiobook and being engaged with it. All of these things would lead to flow. If you did all of these really well, time would slow down and things would happen and you'd be energized. So I'm loving this list. Let's keep going.
That's what's so interesting too, because you really can't separate the 5 and the 6. You can't separate flow and wonder. They have, but you can, for the sake of helping people. It's good to work with each of the 4 elements.
You can slow it down, but it's cause and effect. So you can't have the cause without the effect.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're 2 different functions, but you're gonna get one. And what you demonstrated back in season 1 is you can slow down time between the 5 and the 6. and you can be more aware of it and see all these, ranges in the six through the six. So I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So following a recipe, like anything like taking time for time management. You know that saying, it takes money to make money. That's
Hmm.
money is always connected to the eight. And that's totally
Hmm.
true. If you hold on to your money, like, you can't make it. But if you start like giving it in the right places, it can grow. You invest in it.
Money is meant to be exchanged. It's meant to
Exactly.
be spent. It's like blood. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
again, money is always connected to collective. Time, though, is for yourself. Anything 5, 6 is
Nice.
personal. Anything 7, 8. So what do I? So in this world, the 5 is so important. Everything's important. They're all equal, but we need to take time to manage our time better. And nobody does this. They're on autopilot and they don't realize that if you just schedule 20 minutes a week to sit down and really ask yourself, what do I want to do this week? What do I want to accomplish? What are my intentions? What's my goals? So, and that's really what the Wheel of Bliss is all about. We're doing it on the biggest scale. Like, what do you want?
Nice.
Yeah. So, but all that stuff is working with the 5. Consistency in general is good for the 5, but meditation, 5 minutes a day. We've talked about that in season 1.
Yep.
Sit and do nothing, but observe your mind for 5 minutes a day. If you do 5 minutes of breathing into your belly, lay down, do a little yoga or movement, now you're working the 7 and the 5 at the same time. And again, everything you work for any one of these states helps each other. It's just like the body. So
Yeah.
that's why, again, I've had a hard time putting all this together, because most people are working on one element at most. And I'm trying to say, put them all together at the same time. Go for your bliss. It's easier than just going for ecstasy or going for freedom. If you go for all 4 of them, you're more likely to get all 4.
Nice.
So take a different path to work, like just, shift your thoughts. Strategy game. Oh, quick strategy games. So I like these really intense games where you have to like calculate a lot of numbers. And if I move here, then actually I was playing this game on the computer, and I actually remembered I made a game in 7th grade, which was like Dungeons and Dragons, but it had this strategy component where, and that's really been, I don't know, it's like really funny.
Nice.
One of my secrets is um, cross-cultural openness. So again, what did I do? I traveled all over the world, even before that. So learning different languages, learning different cultures, because a language is so deep. 6, all of the 6 is basically language. That's the whole way the 6 is kept together.
Yep.
So if you learn 2 different languages, now you're 5. Because I learned 3 languages, not fluently in any of them, but you have to completely let go of all your rules of English. You
Yep.
can't just translate it, and you can't just learn the grammar. You have to, like Japanese, the verb comes at the end of the sentence. You have to like get into that mindset. It's a totally different state.
Hmm.
I've mentioned breath control
Right.
and journaling. Journaling is
Right.
great for 5 and 6, obviously. And yeah, and again, there's more and more increasing research coming out about the benefits of this metacognition. It's kind of like great, because it's like one of the only areas, flow too, which really hasn't gotten enough attention. There's a lot of
Mhm.
attention on the 7 and the 7 and the 8 these days, right? Like,
Right.
all about relationships and what's your orientation and what's this and how to make money. But yeah, it's I think there's going to be a big interest. Even like spirituality and Christianity has become very 7, 8, and
Yep.
yeah. So I feel like we're in a very great place for this, and yeah, it reduces anxiety, memory. Again, you're exercising your brain with this,
Right.
um, and yeah. So that's about all I got for the 5. Yeah. It improves the quality of your mind, and therefore your whole life. Like, this is fundamental.
Awesome. So what's your summary for the 5? How would you describe the 5 in short?
Um, yeah, like it's the most subtle part of you. Um, without going into the three, like that's like, and it's really where, again, like it's really where your power is. It's your director. So we
Nice.
talked about like the earth being like the entrepreneur, the water being like the healer, the doctor, the fire being like the bard or the artist, the air is like the scientist.
Nice.
So it's like, yeah, the five
Nice.
is the scientist.
So the next episode, obviously, we cover the 4, but you mentioned the 3 so much.
I know.
It'd be great to do the 3 and the 4, but the problem is I know the 4 is very large with the 4 archetypes and everything, and I know the 3 is very large. So I guess hopefully we'll make the 4 fun and not having people look past it to the 3. But thank you so much, Jason. This was great. This is absolutely the heart of the model, and I think you did a great job explaining that as that turning point.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.